Admiral Ketvar stood on the bridge of the Silent Watcher. His 6 eyes focused on the tactical display. The massive Zephyrian observation ship hung in space, invisible to both fleets approaching the battle zone. Around him, his crew worked quietly at their stations, recording everything for the Galactic Council. "The human fleet is maintaining course," reported his sensor officer, Veltar. 17 ships total. Primitive fusion drives and chemical rockets. Kethvar's mandibles clicked in amusement. The Galactic Council had sent 12 different species to watch this battle. Everyone wanted to see what would happen when the newest galactic species met real warriors. The Karthak Dominion had agreed to this demonstration. They would crush the humans quickly and cleanly, teaching the galaxy that some species simply weren't ready for space. "How many Karthak ships?" Kethvar asked. 43 heavy cruisers and their support fleet. Veltar replied. "The humans are outnumbered 3-1. On other observation ships scattered throughout the system, representatives from the Altarian Republic, the Centauri Federation, and 9 other civilizations watched the same displays. They had all placed bets on how long the humans would last. The longest estimate was 6 hours. Most predicted surrender within 2. The human fleet was led by a ship called the UES Liberty. Captain Jake Morrison stood on its bridge, studying the enemy formation. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. His uniform was simple blue cloth, nothing like the ceremonial armor worn by Karthak commanders or the energy shields used by Altarian captains. "Enemy fleet detected," called out Lieutenant Tom Parker from the sensor station. "Looks like they brought friends." Morrison nodded. "How many?" 40+ capital ships, sir. Maybe twice that in smaller vessels." Commander Lisa Hayes, Morrison's second-in-command, looked up from her tactical display. She was a woman in her 30s with short brown hair and steady hands. "Orders, Captain?" "Signal to fleet. Attack formation beta. No retreat." Hayes blinked. "Sir, the odds are—" "I can count, Lisa." "Signal to fleet." On the Silent Watcher, Kethvar watched the human formation change. Instead of spreading out for defense, the human ships were bunching together. It made no tactical sense. "Are they trying to surrender already?" asked his communications officer. "No surrender signals detected," Veltar reported. "They're accelerating toward the Karthak fleet." Kethvar's eye stalks twisted in confusion. The humans were charging directly at a superior force. It was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. In the galaxy's 10,000 years of recorded warfare, no species had ever opened battle with a direct frontal assault against superior numbers. The Karthak fleet waited in perfect formation. Their ships were sleek and deadly, built from metals unknown to most species. Energy shields shimmered around each vessel. Weapons that could crack planets waited to fire. War leader Graktar commanded the Karthak from his flagship Death's Edge. He was a massive reptilian creature with scales like black steel and claws that could cut through armor. His species had conquered 40 systems through superior firepower and disciplined tactics. "The human vermin approach," hissed his tactical officer. Graktar's tail swished with anticipation. "Let them come close. We will destroy them all at once and be done with this tedium." On the observation ships, alien commanders leaned forward to watch. This would be educational for the younger species. The galaxy had rules about warfare. You didn't throw away lives needlessly. You didn't attack without calculating odds. You certainly didn't charge into certain death. Captain Morrison stood calmly on the Liberty's bridge as the distance closed. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency. No one seemed afraid. No one questioned the suicidal approach. "Range in 30 seconds," reported weapons officer Danny Clark. He was a young man, barely 25, with steady hands and a calm voice. "All ships, prepare to engage," Morrison announced over the fleet channel. The alien observers expected to see the humans break formation now, or at least slow down. Instead, the human ships continued their charge. Some even accelerated faster. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Foster commanded the Marine contingent aboard the Liberty. She was reviewing boarding plans with her sergeants, preparing to fight hand-to-hand against creatures twice their size with natural armor and poisonous claws. "Remember, "We go for the joints," she told her troops. "Their armor is strong, but their joints are weak. Get in close and stay there." Her Marines nodded. They were planning to board enemy ships during active combat. The alien observers would have called it insane, but Foster's troops just checked their weapons and waited. On the Silent Watcher, Kethvar watched the range close to combat distance. The Kaarthak opened fire with their particle beam weapons. Streams of deadly energy crossed space toward the human fleet. The humans didn't dodge. The first human ship, a destroyer called Defiance, took a direct hit that should have vaporized it. Instead, it kept coming, trailing debris and atmosphere, but still firing its primitive missiles. "Impossible," whispered Veltar. "That ship should be destroyed." More Kaarthak weapons fired. Human ships began taking damage, but they didn't break formation. They didn't retreat. They just kept charging forward, absorbing punishment that should have stopped any reasonable species. Then the humans reached weapon range and opened fire. Their weapons were crude by galactic standards. Chemical rockets, magnetic accelerators, and simple fusion warheads. But they fired everything at once, holding nothing back for defense or retreat. The alien observers watched in growing confusion as the battle began in earnest. This wasn't how civilized species fought. Where was the careful maneuvering? Where were the calculated exchanges of fire? Where was the sense of self-preservation? Captain Morrison stood unmoved as his ship shook from enemy hits. All weapons, continuous fire. Signal the fleet, close to boarding range. Commander Hayes stared at him. "Jake, they'll tear us apart that range." Morrison's smile was cold. "That's the idea, Lisa. That's exactly the idea." On observation ships throughout the system, alien commanders began to realize they weren't watching a battle. They were watching something else entirely, something they had no words for in any civilized language. The humans weren't fighting to win. They weren't fighting to survive. They were fighting to fight, and that difference was about to change everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare. The Kaarthak war fleet struck first with precision the galaxy expected. Their particle beam weapons lit up space with deadly accuracy. War leader Graktar watched from his command throne as the energy bolts reached the human formation. Any civilized species would have scattered now. The humans kept coming. The destroyer Defiance took 3 direct hits. Its hull split open, vending atmosphere and debris. On the observation ships, alien commanders nodded. This was how battles ended, with overwhelming firepower destroying primitive opponents. But Defiance didn't stop. It kept flying forward, returning fire with its crude missiles even as sections of the ship broke away. Status report on the human vessel, demanded Admiral Kethvar from his observation post. Massive hull breach, life support failing, engines at 60%, reported Veltar. They should be requesting evacuation. Instead, Defiance accelerated directly toward the nearest Kaarthak cruiser. On the human destroyer's bridge, Captain Pete Nash gripped his command chair as sparks flew from damaged systems. Half his crew was dead, the other half was bleeding, but no one had left their posts. "Sir, we're losing atmosphere fast," reported a surviving weapons officer. "Good," Nash replied calmly. "Less mass to carry. All power to engines and weapons." The Kaarthak had never seen anything like it. A dying ship was attacking them instead of surrendering. War leader Graktar's tactical display showed the human destroyer on a collision course. "They mean to ram us," hissed the second in command. "Impossible. No species wastes ships in suicide attacks." But Defiance kept coming. At the last moment, when the Kaarthak cruiser tried to change course, the human destroyer opened up with everything it had. Missiles, railgun rounds, and finally the ship itself, slamming into the alien vessel's side. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire and twisted metal. On the observation ships, silence fell. No one had ever seen anything like this in 10,000 years of galactic warfare. Ships were valuable. Crews were valuable. You didn't throw them away for minor tactical advantages. But the humans had 16 more ships, and they were all still charging. Pilot Officer Danny Clark led a squadron of human fighters toward the Kaarthak formation. His small craft were ancient by galactic standards, fusion rockets with chemical fuel and basic computers. The K-Arthak interceptors moved to meet them with weapons that could vaporize his entire squadron. "Danny, you're outnumbered 5-1. Call Commander Hayes over the radio." "Copy that," Clark replied cheerfully. "Sounds about right." The alien observers expected to see the human fighters break off or call for support. Instead, Clark's squadron dove straight into the enemy formation. When the K-Arthak interceptors surrounded them, the humans did something no civilized pilot would consider. They turned off their engines and used their fighters as guided missiles. This is Danny to all fighters. When your weapons are empty, ram them. Make every shot count, including yourselves. Clark's fighter took heavy damage from K-Arthak weapons, but he held his course. When his missiles were gone, when his guns were silent, when his ship was die around him, he pointed the nose at the largest enemy vessel and pushed the throttle to maximum. The K-Arthak interceptor tried to dodge, but Clark had calculated the intercept perfectly. His fighter smashed through the alien ship's cockpit at 300 miles per hour. Both craft disintegrated instantly. All across the battle zone, human fighters were doing the same thing. When they ran out of ammunition, they became ammunition. When their ships were too damaged to fight, they became weapons. The alien observers watched in growing horror as an entire fighter squadron deliberately destroyed itself to take out half a K-Arthak wing. No computer models had predicted this. No military doctrine accounted for an enemy that treated their own lives as expendable resources. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Foster watched the fighter action from the Liberty's Marine Bay. Her troops were sealed in their combat armor, ready to board enemy ships. The idea of boarding an enemy vessel during active combat was considered insane by galactic standards, but Foster's Marines just checked their weapons and waited for their turn. "Listen up," she told her troops. "The K-Arthak are bigger than us, stronger than us, and they have natural armor, so we're going to hit them where it hurts." She held up a combat knife. "Close quarters, personal weapons. Make them afraid to turn corners." The Marines nodded. They were planning to fight giant lizard warriors with knives and determination. The alien observers would have called it suicide. Foster called it Tuesday. The main human fleet reached the K-Arthak battle line, and the real fighting began. The UES Liberty took hit after hit from enemy weapons, but Captain Morrison never changed course. His ship was heading straight for the K-Arthak flagship, and he meant to get there. "Jake, we can't take much more of this," warned Commander Hayes as another explosion rocked the bridge. "We don't need to take much more," Morrison replied. "Signal all ships. Prepare for boarding actions." The K-Arthak couldn't understand what they were seeing. The humans were trying to get closer, not farther away. They were charging into the teeth of superior firepower instead of using tactics and maneuvers. War leader Graktar watched the human flagship approach his own vessel. The primitive ship was bleeding air and fire. Half its weapons were silent, but it kept coming like some ancient predator that didn't know when to die. "All weapons on the human flagship," he ordered. "Destroy it now." Every K-Arthak ship in range opened fire on the Liberty. The human vessel should have been vaporized instantly. Instead, it absorbed the punishment and kept flying. Sections of the ship broke away. Entire compartments were blown into space. But the core of the vessel held together through engineering that impressed even the advanced observers. On his observation ship, Admiral Kethvar realized something that chilled his multiple hearts. The humans weren't losing control of the battle. This was their plan. They had intended to take this much damage. They had built their ships to absorb incredible punishment, while still completing their mission. "Sir," whispered Veltar, "I don't think they know how to surrender." Kethvar watched the Liberty close to boarding range of the K-Arthak flagship despite taking enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The human ship's hull was more whole than metal now, but somehow it was still flying, still fighting, still coming. Then he understood the horrible truth. The humans weren't trying to win through superior tactics or technology. They were trying to win by being willing to pay any price, accept any losses, endure any punishment. They weren't fighting a battle. They were demonstrating that they had no limits, no point at which they would stop, no price they wouldn't pay. The alien observers had come to watch a civilized demonstration of force. Instead, They were watching something ancient and terrible that had crawled up from whatever nightmare world had created the human species. Major Rick Thompson coordinated the artillery barrage from his position aboard the cruiser Boston. His targeting computer showed friendly forces mixed in with KR-THAC ground troops on the captured mining station below. Any civilized commander would wait for the forces to separate before firing. Thompson opened fire on everything. "Sir, our own people are down there," protested his artillery officer, a young lieutenant named Steve Parker. "I know," Thompson replied calmly. "Signal them to take cover. Then keep firing." On the observation ships, alien commanders watched in disbelief as human artillery struck their own positions. The concept violated every rule of civilized warfare. You protected your own forces. You minimized casualties. You didn't deliberately target areas where your own troops were fighting. The humans did it without hesitation. Admiral Kethvar's tactical display showed the mining station being pounded by human weapons. Karthak forces were taking heavy losses, but so were the humans caught in their own bombardment. "Are they making an error?" asked Veltar. "No," Kethvar replied quietly. "They're trading casualties. They're people for ours, and they consider it an acceptable exchange." Dr. Helen Grant worked in the science section of the Liberty, studying captured Karthak equipment while the battle raged around her. She was a calm woman in her 40s with gray hair and steady hands. While everyone else fought for their lives, she was conducting research. "Fascinating," she murmured, examining a Kathak weapon. "The energy matrix is completely different from our models." A nearby explosion shook the ship, throwing her against a bulkhead. She steadied herself and returned to her work. "Doctor, shouldn't you be in a shelter?" asked her assistant, a nervous young man named Paul. "This is the best chance we'll have to study their technology," Grant replied. "Pass me the scanner." She treated the battle as a scientific opportunity rather than a life-threatening crisis. While alien species would have evacuated their researchers to safety, the humans kept theirs working at their posts, gathering intelligence even as the ship fell apart around them. The Karthak had taken several human prisoners during the fighting at the mining station. War leader Graktar expected them to provide information about human tactics and weaknesses. Instead, the prisoners volunteered for suicide missions. Sergeant Ben Taylor had been captured when his squad was overrun. The Karthak interrogation specialist, a creature called Mindrender Vexhai, tried to break him using traditional psychological methods. "Your fleet is outnumbered," Vexhai explained. "Your ships are primitive. Your cause is hopeless. Tell us about your battle plans, and we will treat you with honor." Taylor smiled. "You want to know our battle plans? Here they are. We're going to kill all of you. Then we're going to take your ships apart and figure out how they work. Then we're going to build better ships and kill whoever sent you." Vexhai had interrogated prisoners from dozens of species over centuries of conquest. They usually broke within hours, revealing military secrets in exchange for mercy or better treatment. The human just stared at him with calm, cold eyes. "You cannot win." Vexhai tried again. "Even if your fleet prevails here, the Karthak Dominion has thousands of ships. We will return in greater numbers." "Good," Taylor replied. "That means more targets." The interrogation was interrupted when the prisoners broke out of their cells. The Karthak had installed standard containment fields designed to hold any known species. They hadn't planned for humans who would deliberately injure themselves to create electrical shorts in the containment system. Taylor led the escape using a piece of metal he had torn from his own broken arm. The other prisoners followed him, all of them wounded, all of them armed with improvised weapons, all of them moving toward the ship's critical systems instead of the escape pods. On his observation ship, Admiral Kethvar watched the tactical display update as human boarding parties spread through Karthak vessels. Normal boarding actions were careful, methodical affairs. You secured key areas, established strong points, and advanced gradually. The humans just ran straight toward the enemy bridge, reactor, or weapon systems, fighting everything in their path. When they encountered superior numbers, they set off explosive charges they had made from their own equipment. Captain Sue Phillips commanded the damaged cruiser Chicago. Her ship had taken massive damage from Karthak weapons, but she kept fighting. When her main guns were destroyed, she fired missiles. When her missiles were gone, she fired her point defense weapons. When those were silent, she started ramming. "Ma'am, we're losing structural integrity," reported her chief engineer, a woman named Carol. "How long until we break apart?" Phillips asked. "Maybe 10 minutes." "Perfect. Signal the K-Arthak flagship that we're surrendering. When they come alongside to accept our surrender, ram them." Carol stared at her captain. "Ma'am, that's—" "An excellent use of a dying ship," Phillips finished. "Get everyone into the armored sections and prepare for collision." The alien observers watched as a human cruiser broadcast surrender signals while maneuvering for a ramming attack. It was the most outrageous violation of military honor they had ever witnessed. You didn't fake surrender to set up an attack. You didn't use diplomatic protocols as weapons. The humans did both without hesitation. War leader Graktar was beginning to understand that he was fighting something beyond his experience. The K-Arthak Dominion had conquered 40 systems using superior technology and disciplined tactics. They had never faced an enemy that treated death as a tactical advantage. Status report: he demanded from his bridge crew, 17 human vessels remain operational, reported his tactical officer. But we have lost 12 ships to ramming attacks, boarding actions, and unusual tactics. Unusual tactics? They're using their own damage vessels as guided missiles, sir. They are also detonating their own ships to damage multiple targets simultaneously. Graktar's claws scraped against his command throne. The humans were paying an enormous price in ships and lives, but they were making the K-Arthak pay an even higher price. It was mathematically unsustainable for both fleets, but the humans seemed perfectly willing to destroy everything rather than accept defeat. Major Thompson's artillery bombardment had cleared the mining station, but at a cost that would have horrified any civilized military. Of the 300 human troops who had been fighting on the station, only 50 had survived. The rest had been killed by their own weapons. Thompson reviewed the casualty reports without emotion. "Acceptable losses," he noted in his log. "Mission accomplished." The alien observers realized they were watching a completely different philosophy of warfare. The humans didn't try to minimize casualties. They optimized them. They spent lives like ammunition, calculating exchange rate, and accepting any trade that hurt their enemies more than it hurt them. It was effective. It was ruthless. And it was completely inhuman by galactic standards. Sergeant Ben Taylor dragged himself through the Kithak corridor with one arm completely gone and the other barely working. Blood leaked from multiple wounds, and his breathing was shallow from a punctured lung. By any medical standard known to the galaxy, he should have been unconscious or dead. Instead, he was setting charges to destroy the enemy ship's main reactor. The alien observers watched through their sensors as Taylor places improvised explosives with steady hands. His vital signs were so weak that most species would consider him clinically dead, yet he worked with the focused determination of a healthy soldier. "How is that creature still functioning?" whispered Veltar from a station aboard the Silent Watcher. Admiral Kethvar studied the medical readings. "Unknown. Their physiology suggests they should collapse from shock and blood loss. Yet they continue operating at full efficiency." Taylor finished his work and started crawling toward the ship's bridge. He had no intention of escaping. He planned to capture the K-Arthak command crew while bleeding to death from wounds that should have killed him 10 minutes ago. On the human flagship Liberty, Captain Sue Phillips managed a battle from her damaged command chair. A K-Arthak boarding party had reached the bridge an hour ago. The fighting had been brutal and close. Phillips had taken a claw strike across her chest that laid her ribs bare, and her right leg was broken in 3 places. She commanded the fleet anyway. "Signal to Boston to concentrate fire on the K-Arthak flagship," she ordered. Her voice was steady despite the pain medication that should have knocked her unconscious. "Ma'am, you need medical attention," urged her medical officer, Dr. Kate Young. "After we win," Phillips replied. "How's our ammunition?" Young checked her readings. The captain had lost enough blood to kill most humans, but her heart rate remained steady and her tactical thinking was sharp. It defied every medical text Young had studied. "We're down to emergency reserves," Young reported. "Good. That means we get to be creative. In the engineering sections of human ships throughout the fleet, wounded crew members continued working at their posts. The Kaarthak had targeted human life support systems, expecting the crews to evacuate damaged areas. Instead, humans worked in vacuum suits, repairing systems while breathing bottled air. Chief Engineer Kate Young worked in the Liberty's reactor room, while the hull around her glowed red-hot from enemy weapons. Half her team was dead. The other half was wounded, but the reactor kept running at full power. "Chief, the containment field is fluctuating," reported her assistant through the radio. "I can see that," Young replied calmly. She was welding a patch over a hull breach while standing ankle-deep in radioactive coolant, keep the power flowing. "But if the field fails, then we'll all die in a nuclear explosion instead of being shot by lizards," Young said. "I prefer nuclear explosions. Keep working." The alien observers tried to understand what they were seeing. In every civilized military, wounded personnel were evacuated to safety and replaced by fresh troops. The humans just bandaged their wounds and kept fighting. War leader Graktar received reports from his boarding parties that defied belief. Human defenders who had been shot multiple times continued fighting. Humans who had lost limbs used their remaining limbs to operate weapons. Humans who should have been dead from blood loss were still throwing grenades. "The human medical officer is treating patients while engaging in combat," reported one Kaarthak boarding leader. "She shot 3 of my warriors while performing surgery on her own wounded." Dr. Young was indeed operating on injured crew members in the Liberty's medical bay, while Kaarthak invaders tried to break through her barricaded doors. She had rigged explosive booby traps around the medical equipment, turning the hospital into a fortress. "Hold still," she told her patient, a Marine named Jim Ross who had been shot through the stomach. "I need to stop this bleeding before the lizards break in." Ross gripped his rifle with both hands while Young worked on his wounds. "Doc, they're coming to the ventilation system." "I know. Can you shoot left-handed?" "Sure." "Good. Hold this clamp while I get my pistol." Young continued the surgery with one hand while shooting Kaarthak invaders with the other. When she ran out of ammunition, she threw surgical instruments at them. When those were gone, she used the surgical laser as a weapon. The patient she was operating on never stopped shooting. Captain Morrison watched the battle from the Liberty's bridge while blood ran down his face from a head wound. A Kaarthak explosive had collapsed part of the ceiling on him, but he remained at his command post. "Status report," he called out. "We've lost main engines. Half our weapons are down, and we're venting atmosphere from 14 breaches," reported Commander Hayes. She was wrapped in bandages from her own injuries, but still managed her tactical display. "Excellent," Morrison said. "That means we're lighter and faster. Signal all ships close to ramming distance." Hayes stared at him. "Jake, ramming distance means we can't miss when they shoot at us." "It also means we can't miss when we shoot at them," Morrison replied. "Do it." The human fleet, reduced to 11 battered ships, accelerated toward the Kaarthak formation. Every human vessel was damaged. Every crew was depleted. But they fought with increasing ferocity instead of decreasing effectiveness. Pilot Officer Danny Clark flew his damaged fighter with one eye sealed shut from blood and his left arm hanging useless at his side. His fighter's controls had been partially destroyed, so he steered with his knees while operating weapons with his remaining good hand. "Danny, your ship is falling apart," called his wingman over the radio. "Still flies," Clark replied cheerfully. "Still shoots. Still good for ramming if necessary." He dove his crippled fighter straight at Kaarthak cruiser, firing everything he had. When his weapons ran dry, he prepared to use the fighter itself as a missile. At the last second, his engines exploded from battle damage, turning his controlled ramming attack into an uncontrolled collision that was somehow even more effective. The alien observers realized that human effectiveness actually increased as they took damage. Wounded humans fought harder, not softer. Damaged ships became more dangerous, not less dangerous. It was completely contrary to every military theory in galactic history. Admiral Kethvar reviewed the medical scans of human combatants. Their stress hormones increased with injury, he noted. Pain seems to improve their performance rather than degrade it. Veltar checked his readings twice. Sir, that's impossible. Pain is supposed to incapacitate biological creatures. Apparently not humans, Kethvar replied grimly. They seem to use pain as a combat enhancement. The battle continued to rage, but the alien observers were beginning to understand that they weren't watching a normal military engagement. They were watching something that had evolved on a world where being wounded meant you had to fight hard to survive, where pain was a signal to increase aggression rather than seek safety. The humans weren't just refusing to quit when injured, they were getting stronger. War leader Graktar made his decision when a human fleet closed a point-blank range despite overwhelming losses. The Karthak Dominion had one weapon they used only against the most dangerous enemies, the planet-killer device that could crack worlds in half. Activate the Void Render, he commanded from his flagship's bridge. The massive weapon emerged from the Karthak dreadnought like a mechanical flower of death. Energy patterns that could destabilize planetary cores began to charge. Any civilized enemy would retreat immediately when faced with such overwhelming firepower. The humans accelerated toward it. Colonel Pete Nash watched the Karthak superweapon deploy from his position aboard the cruiser Dallas. His tactical display showed energy readings that could vaporize his entire fleet in a single shot. He opened a channel to all remaining human ships. All vessels, this is Colonel Nash. They're bringing out the big gun. Anyone who wants to surrender is free to do so. Silence filled the communication channel. Then Captain Morrison's voice came through from the Liberty. Pete, that's the most insulting thing anyone's ever said to me. Commander Hayes added, Sir, respectfully, go to hell. One by one, every human ship commander checked in with variations of the same message. No one was surrendering. No one was retreating. They were all accelerating toward the weapon that could destroy planets. On the observation ships, alien commanders watched in amazement as the humans continued their attack despite facing certain annihilation. The Void Render was charging up, its energy signature growing stronger by the second. Admiral Kethvar calculated the tactical situation. They cannot possibly survive the Void Render's discharge. Their ships will be atomized. Perhaps they don't understand the weapon's capabilities, suggested Veltar. But Dr. Helen Grant understood perfectly. She was still working in the Liberty Science section, analyzing the energy patterns of the Karthak superweapon while the ship flew directly toward it. Fascinating, she murmured to her assistant Paul. The energy matrix is designed to disrupt molecular bonds at the quantum level. Quite elegant, really. Paul stared at her. Doctor, that thing is going to kill us all. Probably, Grant agreed. Pass me the quantum scanner. I want to record the energy signature before we die. She treated their impending annihilation as a research opportunity. Colonel Nash had a different plan. He opened his ship's internal communication system and addressed his entire crew. Attention all hands. The enemy is about to fire a planet-killer weapon at us. We cannot survive it. However, we can make sure it doesn't get a chance to fire twice. He paused to let that sink in. I'm going to detonate our main reactor right next to their superweapon. Anyone who wants to evacuate to the escape pods has 30 seconds to do so. Nash waited 30 seconds. No one left their posts. Outstanding. All power to engines. Let's make this count. The Dallas accelerated directly toward the charging Void Render, with its reactor set to overload. Nash's plan was simple. If they were going to die anyway, they would take the superweapon with them. Engineer Chief Kate Young monitored the reactor overload from the engine room. The containment field was already fluctuating dangerously, and she was pushing beyond all safety limits. Chief, the reactor's going to blow in 2 minutes, warned her assistant. I'm counting on it, Young replied calmly. She was standing next to a fusion reaction that could level a city, manually controlling the overload to maximize the explosion. War leader Graktar watched a human cruiser approach his superweapon. His tactical officer reported massive energy spikes from a human ship's reactor. They're going to self-destruct, the officer reported. At this range, their explosion will damage the Void Render, Graktar realized. He had never faced an enemy willing to destroy themselves just to deny him a weapon. Fire the Void Render now, before they reach us. The Karthak superweapon discharged its planet-killing energy directly at the human fleet. The beam of destructive force crossed space in seconds, aimed at the Liberty and the ships around it. Captain Morrison watched the energy beam approach on his tactical display. He had perhaps 5 seconds before his ship was atomized. He used them to give one final order. All remaining ships follow the Dallas's example. Reactor overloads, ramming speed. Make them pay for every shot. The Void Render's beam struck the human formation and vaporized 4 ships instantly. The Liberty, Boston, and Chicago survived only because they were shielded by the ships that had been destroyed. But the Dallas had reached the Karthak superweapon. Kate Young stood calmly in her engine room as the reactor went critical. The explosion would kill everyone aboard and destroy the ship, but it would also cripple the weapon that had just murdered her friends. "See you on the other side," she said quietly, then released a containment field. The Dallas exploded with the force of a small nuclear weapon. The blast severely damaged the Void Render and destroyed 2 Karthak escort ships. More importantly, it demonstrated something that chilled the alien observers. The humans would rather destroy themselves than allow an enemy to gain any advantage. Captain Jim Ross commanded the surviving cruiser Boston. His ship had taken massive damage from the Void Render's discharge, but he continued the attack. When his main weapons were destroyed, he began converting everything else into weapons. "Strip the medical bay," he ordered. "Use the surgical equipment to make explosive devices. Convert the mess hall food processors into chemical weapons. Turn the recreation equipment into projectiles." His crew worked with calm efficiency to transform their ship into an improvised weapon. They turned medical supplies into poison gas, recreational equipment into shrapnel, and food processors into chemical weapons. The alien observers watched as the humans weaponized everything aboard their ships. Life support systems became toxic gas dispensers. Navigation equipment became guidance systems for improvised missiles. Even the furniture was converted into projectiles. Admiral Kethvar realized what he was witnessing. They're not just willing to die. They're willing to turn their entire civilization into a weapon. The remaining human ships continued their assault despite impossible odds. When conventional weapons failed, they used unconventional ones. When those ran out, they used their ships themselves as weapons. War leader Graktar watched his tactical display with growing horror. His superior force was being whittled away by an enemy that refused to accept the concept of defeat. Every trade favored the Karthak numerically, but the humans seemed perfectly willing to trade everything for any advantage. "Status report," he demanded. "We have lost 18 ships, including severe damage to the Void Render. The humans have 7 vessels remaining, all heavily damaged." Graktar's claws scraped his command throne. By any reasonable standard, he was winning. His fleet still outnumbered the humans 2-1. But the humans had just proved they were willing to destroy planet-killing weapons through suicide attacks. What would they do if they were actually losing? Captain Morrison stood on the Liberty's bridge, surrounded by damaged equipment and wounded crew. His ship was more debris than vessel now, held together by emergency patches and determination. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "Prepare for final assault. All remaining ships, maximum acceleration. No survivors, no surrender, no retreat." Commander Hayes looked at him with something like awe. "Jake, there's only 7 of us left." Morrison's smile was cold as vacuum. "Then we'll just have to fight harder." The alien observers realized they weren't watching a battle anymore. They were watching a demonstration of what happened when an entire species decided that victory was less important than making the enemy pay an unacceptable price for it. Communications Officer Ryan Bell monitored the tactical frequencies from a station aboard the Liberty. He was 22 years old, fresh from the academy, and he was coordinating nuclear strikes while joking with his teammates about their chances of survival. "Hey, Sarah, what do you think? Should we use the big warheads or save them for dessert?" he asked the weapons officer at the next station. Sarah Martinez, barely 24 herself, checked her inventory. "Let's use them all now. If we're still alive in 10 minutes, we can worry about what to throw at them next." The alien observers listened to these communications with growing horror. These weren't seasoned veterans, speaking with grim determination. These were young people treating galactic warfare like a dangerous game. Admiral Kefvar analyzed the human communication patterns. Veltar run an age analysis on the human crew communications. Veltar worked at his console for several minutes. Sir, based on voice patterns and linguistic markers, the average age of human combatants appears to be approximately 25 of their years. Impossible. No species sends children to fight their battles. But the evidence was undeniable. The humans fighting this desperate battle were young by any standard, and they were treating it like a normal Tuesday. Ryan Bell coordinated a strike package that would have required a team of experienced Kaarthak tacticians. He did it while eating something called a sandwich and complaining about the recycled air smell. Control, this is Bell. Target Package Alpha is ready for delivery. Should I wait for confirmation or just blow them up? Captain Morrison's voice came back over the radio. Just blow them up, Ryan. We don't have time for paperwork. Copy that, sir. Blowing them up now. Bell launched 17 nuclear warheads at the Kaarthak formation while humming what sounded like a popular song. The alien observers realized they were watching children who had been raised to view weapons of mass destruction as normal tools. Dr. Helen Grant continued her research in the science section, but now she was being assisted by her graduate student, Amy Foster, who was only 23. Foster was running quantum analyses on Kaarthak technology while the ship fell apart around her. Professor, should I be concerned about the radiation levels? Foster asked. Probably, Grant replied. But we're all going to die in the next hour anyway, so radiation poisoning seems less important than understanding their shield technology. Foster nodded and returned to her work. She treated imminent death as a minor inconvenience rather than a source of terror. The alien observers began intercepting more human communications and realized something that chilled them to their core. This wasn't just a young crew. This was considered a training mission by human standards. Lieutenant Tom Parker, age 26, called over the radio to his friend on another ship. Hey, Mike, remember when Instructor Williams said combat would be scarier than the simulations? Mike Anderson responded from the cruiser Boston. Yeah, he was wrong. This is way more fun than The Sims. I know, right? In The Sims, you don't get to make up your own tactics. The alien observers realized these humans had trained for this scenario. They had practiced fighting hopeless battles against superior forces. They had simulated suicide attacks and ramming maneuvers until they became routine. War leader Graktar intercepted these communications and demanded a translation from his intelligence officer. The report that came back defied belief. War leader, the humans appear to consider this engagement a minor training exercise for their younger warriors. Graktar's claws scraped against his command throne. What do you mean, training exercise? They are discussing this battle in terms typically used for educational activities. They appear to be learning combat techniques through actual warfare. The implications were staggering. If this was how humans trained their youth, what were their actual veterans capable of? The question was answered when backup human forces arrived. Admiral Greystone commanded the reinforcement fleet from her flagship Constitution. She was 55 years old, gray-haired, and completely calm as she surveyed the battle damage. Signal to Liberty, she ordered. Ask Captain Morrison for a status report. Morrison's voice came through the communication system, steady despite the chaos around him. Admiral, we have 7 ships operational heavy casualties, and we're about to ram the enemy flagship. Outstanding work, Jake. Hold position and let us handle the cleanup. Stone's fleet consisted of 20 fresh ships with experienced crews. To the alien observers, it looked like the humans were finally bringing their real military to bear. Instead, Stone treated the massive battle like a training evolution. All ships, this is Admiral Stone. We're going to use this engagement as a practical exercise for our junior officers. Each ship will be commanded by their executive officers, while department heads observe and evaluate performance. She was turning the battle into a teaching moment. Commander Lisa Hayes, who had been Morrison's second in command, found herself promoted to acting captain when Morrison was injured. She was 31 years old and had never commanded a ship in combat before. Ma'am, I don't know if I'm ready for this, she confessed to Morrison as medical teams worked on his wounds. Morrison smiled through his pain. Lisa, You've been fighting impossible odds for 6 hours, and we're still alive. You're ready." Hayes took command of the Liberty and immediately began implementing tactics that would have horrified civilized commanders. She used the ship's escape pods as guided missiles, turned the medical bay into a weapons factory, and ordered the crew to prepare for a boarding action against a ship 5 times their size. The alien observers watched as human children executed complex military maneuvers, while their veteran commanders offered casual advice like instructors at a military academy. Admiral Kefvar realized the full horror of what he was witnessing. Veltar, if these are their students, what are their teachers like? The answer came when Admiral Stone opened fire on the Kaarthak fleet. Her weapons were more advanced than anything the first human fleet had carried, but she used them with the same casual ruthlessness. She targeted Kaarthak ships with precise shots designed to cripple rather than destroy, then sent boarding parties to capture the vessels intact. "Remember," she told her young officers, "the goal is to take their ships apart and figure out how they work. Try to leave some pieces big enough to study." The Kaarthak had never faced an enemy that viewed their advanced technology as educational materials to be dissected and understood. Stone's fleet methodically disabled Kaarthak vessels, then sent teams of human engineers and scientists aboard to examine everything. Dr. Grant, still working despite her injuries, coordinated the technical intelligence gathering. "This is fascinating," she told her students as they examined a captured Kaarthak reactor. "Their containment system is completely different from our models. Someone take notes while I figure out how to make it explode." The alien observers realized that the humans weren't just fighting a battle. They were conducting a comprehensive study of Kaarthak technology while simultaneously destroying the Kaarthak fleet. Every engagement was both a tactical victory and a learning experience. Communications Officer Bell, now working from a backup station after his primary console was destroyed, coordinated the intelligence gathering with the same cheerful efficiency he had shown in combat. "Hey, Professor Grant, I've got the Kaarthak communication protocols figured out. Want me to send fake surrender messages to their remaining ships?" "Excellent idea, Ryan. Tell them we're willing to discuss terms, then blow them up when they lower their shields." Bell began broadcasting fake diplomatic messages while preparing nuclear strikes. The alien observers realized that humans consider treachery and deception to be normal parts of warfare education. Admiral Gray Stone surveyed the battlefield from her command chair with the detached interest of a professor examining test results. Around her, the remnants of 2 fleets drifted in space. Human ships held together by emergency patches and Kaarthak vessels that had learned too late what it meant to fight an enemy, with no concept of acceptable losses. "Status report," she requested calmly. Her tactical officer, a young woman named Carol, checked her displays. "Ma'am, we've captured or destroyed 38 Kaarthak vessels. Their remaining ships are requesting permission to withdraw." Stone considered this for a moment. "Denied. Signal them that surrender is acceptable, retreat is not." War leader Graktar received a human message on his damaged flagship. Half his fleet was gone, destroyed by enemies who treated their own ships as expendable ammunition. The other half was too damaged to fight effectively. But the humans weren't offering mercy. They were offering only surrender or annihilation. War leader, his communications officer reported, "The humans are jamming our hyperspace drives. We cannot escape." Graktar realized with growing horror that the humans had planned this from the beginning. They hadn't just come to fight. They had come to eliminate his entire fleet so thoroughly that no one would escape to warn the Kaarthak Dominion about human capabilities. Captain Jim Ross commanded the battle-damaged Boston as it approached the Kaarthak flagship. His ship was more wreckage than vessel now, but he had converted the medical bay into a weapons factory and was using surgical equipment to manufacture explosive devices. "This is Captain Ross to all vessels," he announced over the general frequency. "I'm converting our medical ships into kinetic weapons. Anyone have objections to using hospital ships as ammunition?" The response from a human fleet was immediate and unanimous. No objections. The alien observers watched in absolute horror as human medical vessels, clearly marked with medical symbols, accelerated toward Kaarthak ships at ramming speed. Using hospital ships as weapons violated every principle of civilized warfare. The humans did it cheerfully. Dr. Helen Grant coordinated the conversion from her position in the Liberty's ruined science section. She was turning medical supplies into chemical weapons while her graduate students used surgical lasers as cutting tools to breach enemy hulls. "Remember," she told her team, "we want to preserve their computer cores intact. Everything else can be destroyed." She treated the systematic destruction of an enemy fleet as a research project with specific objectives. Communications Officer Ryan Bell had established communication with the surviving Carthak ships and was now conducting psychological warfare while coordinating the final assault. "Attention, Carthak vessels," he announced in perfect Carthak language that he had learned during the battle. "This is Communications Officer Bell of the human fleet. We've studied your language, your tactics, and your technology. We know how your ships work better than you do now." He paused to let that sink in. "We're going to take your ships apart piece by piece. We're going to study every component until we understand your civilization completely. Then we're going to build better ships and use them against your reinforcements." The Carthak fleet tried to respond, but Bell had already begun jamming their communications with recordings of human music that somehow made their weapon systems malfunction. Admiral Kethvar watched from his observation ship as the humans systematically dismantled the Carthak fleet, like mechanics taking apart broken vehicles. They weren't just winning. They were conducting a comprehensive analysis of everything Carthak while they won. "Sir," reported Veltar, "the humans are broadcasting technical manuals to each other. They're sharing real-time analysis of Carthak technology across their entire fleet. They're learning," Kethvar realized with growing dread. "They're turning this battle into an educational exercise that will make them more dangerous for the next engagement." Lieutenant Colonel Amy Foster led the final boarding action against the Carthak flagship. Her Marines were equipped with weapons they had manufactured during the battle from captured Carthak equipment and medical supplies. "Remember the plan," she told her troops as they prepared to breach the enemy hull. "We're not here to capture prisoners. We're here to capture their computer systems, their technical manuals, and their navigation charts." The Marines nodded. They were planning to fight through a ship full of dangerous alien warriors just to steal their homework. Foster's troops breached the Carthak flagship using cutting torches made from surgical equipment. They fought through corridors filled with enemies twice their size, using tactics they had improvised during the battle and weapons they had built from spare parts. War leader Graktar made his final stand on his own bridge, surrounded by his remaining crew. The humans had fought through his entire ship, leaving destruction and technical analysis equipment in their wake. "Surrender now and we'll let you live," offered Foster as her Marines surrounded the Carthak command crew. "Keep fighting and we'll kill you all and take your stuff anyway." Graktar stared at the human commander. She was half his size, obviously wounded, and surrounded by enemies. Yet she spoke with the confidence of someone who had never considered the possibility of defeat. "What are you?" he asked in broken human language. Foster smiled. "We're humans. We're what happens when evolution decides that being reasonable is optional." She gestured to her Marines, who were already connecting human equipment to Carthak computer systems. "We're also really good at learning new things. Thanks for the technology demonstration." The Carthak war leader surrendered, but not because he was defeated. He surrendered because he finally understood what kind of species he had been fighting. The humans weren't just willing to die. They were willing to turn death itself into a weapon, and they treated every battle as an opportunity to become more dangerous. Captain Morrison, still wounded but back on his feet, coordinated the salvage operations as human teams swarmed through captured Carthak vessels. They were taking apart advanced alien technology with the enthusiasm of children opening presents. "How long until we understand their hyperspace drives?" he asked Dr. Grant. "Give me 6 hours," she replied confidently. "Their technology is actually quite elegant once you figure out the control mechanisms." "Outstanding. When we get home, we'll be able to build better ships than they have." The alien observers realized that the humans had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They had not only defeated a superior force, but they had learned everything about their enemy's technology in the process. The next human fleet would be equipped with hybrid human Carthak technology and tactics proven in actual combat. Admiral Stone addressed her fleet as they prepared to depart for human space. Outstanding work, everyone. We've eliminated a Kaarthak strike force, captured their advanced technology, and provided valuable combat experience for our junior officers. She paused to review the casualty reports. Acceptable losses, she noted with satisfaction. Mission accomplished. The human fleet disappeared into hyperspace, taken with them captured Kaarthak ships, stolen technology, and the knowledge that they could defeat anyone willing to fight by civilized rules. Behind them, they left wreckage, terrified alien observers, and the growing realization that humanity was something the galaxy had never seen before, a species that treated galactic warfare as continuing education. Admiral Kethvar sat in his private quarters aboard the Silent Watcher, staring at the tactical recordings of the battle. He had watched the engagement 17 times, and each viewing revealed new horrors about human military doctrine. His report to the Galactic Council would change everything. Around him, the ship was quiet. His crew had not spoken much since witnessing the human victory. There were no words in any civilized language for what they had observed. Computer, begin recording. Kethvar said finally, emergency report to the Galactic Council. Classification level, extinction event. He paused, choosing his words carefully. This is Admiral Kethvar reporting on the engagement between Kaarthak Dominion forces and the human fleet. Recommendation: immediate non-aggression pacts with all human territories. Secondary recommendation: avoid human space entirely. Across the galaxy, other alien observers were preparing similar reports. The Centauri Federation's representative, Ambassador Telseth, had watched the battle from her sleek observation vessel. She was drafting orders to redirect all Federation expansion plans away from human territory. The Altarian Republic's military observer, General Wexhigh, was updating their strategic computer systems to classify humans as extreme threat, avoid contact. His report would recommend building defensive installations specifically to keep humans away from Altarian space. On 12 different ships representing 9 different species, alien commanders reached the same conclusion. Humanity was not a species to be conquered, negotiated with, or even contacted. They were something to be avoided entirely. Admiral Kethvar continued his report. The human military doctrine appears to be based on escalation beyond rational limits. They do not fight to minimize casualties. They optimize casualty exchange rates. They do not seek victory through superior tactics. They achieve victory by being willing to pay any price. He pulled up tactical displays showing human ships ramming Kaarthak vessels. Human spacecraft are designed to function as weapons even after being destroyed. Their crews are trained to continue fighting while mortally wounded. Their commanders treat suicide attacks as routine tactical options. The recording showed human fighters deliberately crashing into enemy ships, human boarding parties fighting through vacuum, and human medical personnel using hospital equipment as weapons. Most disturbing of all, Kethvar continued, they appear to view warfare as an educational opportunity. They study enemy technology while fighting, learn alien languages during battle, and treat each engagement as a chance to become more dangerous. On the observation ship, representing the vegan collective, Captain Yerval was reaching the same conclusions. Her species had spent centuries perfecting the art of civilized warfare, precise, calculated, with minimal casualties and clear objectives. The humans had made civilized warfare obsolete in a single engagement. They don't fight wars, she recorded in her own report. They are war. Every aspect of their psychology appears designed for conflict escalation. Dr. Hellengrand had provided the most chilling evidence during the battle's aftermath. While other species would have celebrated victory and mourning their dead, she had immediately begun analyzing captured Kaarthak technology to design better weapons. Fascinating, her recorded voice played back. If we modify their particle beam configuration with our targeting systems, we could increase destructive yield by 30%. She had treated the battlefield like a laboratory and enemy casualties like research data. Admiral Kethvar added another section to his report. Human age demographics suggest their warriors are considered juveniles by their own standards. The average age of combatants was approximately 25 years. This appears to be a training exercise for their younger population. The implications were staggering. If human children could defeat veteran Karathak forces, what were adult humans capable of? Admiral Greystone had provided that answer when she arrived with reinforcements. She had treated the massive engagement like a minor training evolution, using it as a teaching opportunity for her junior officers. Signal the Academy. Stone had told her communications officer, "Tell them the practical exercise was successful. We'll be sending them detailed analysis of Karathak tactical doctrine within the week." The alien observers realized that humans had turned galactic warfare into a continuing education program. General Wexhigh completed his tactical analysis from the Altarian observation post. His conclusions were even more alarming than Kethvar's. Human military technology is primitive by galactic standards, but their tactical doctrine compensates through sheer ruthlessness. They convert medical equipment into weapons, use diplomatic protocols as deception, and treat their own casualties as acceptable losses. He paused to review footage of human Marines fighting through enemy ships while bleeding from multiple wounds. They do not appear to understand the concept of survival instinct as other species experience it. Pain increases their effectiveness rather than degrading it. Injury makes them more dangerous, not less dangerous. Ambassador Telseth was focusing on the psychological aspects in her report to the Centauri Federation. Humans demonstrate no emotional distress at the prospect of death. They joke while coordinating nuclear strikes. They treat weapons of mass destruction as routine tools. Their youngest warriors display personality traits that would indicate severe psychological disorder in any other species. She had recorded communications Officer Ryan Bell coordinating the destruction of Karathak ships while humming popular music and eating what appeared to be recreational food. They have weaponized their own psychology, she concluded. Fear, pain, and desperation are combat enhancements rather than limiting factors. The final reports were transmitted across the galaxy within hours of the battle's end. The Galactic Council received 12 separate recommendations for the same course of action. Avoid humanity entirely. The Karathak Dominion received the most direct warning. The few surviving Karathak ships that had escaped the battle carried news that their species' expansion toward human space was permanently canceled. War leader Graktar, now a prisoner aboard a human vessel, provided the most detailed intelligence about human capabilities. His interrogation revealed the full scope of what the galaxy was dealing with. "They study us while they fight us," he reported. "They learn our languages, understand our technology, and adapt our weapons for their own use. By the time this battle ended, they understood Karathak military doctrine better than our own strategists." The human fleet had indeed returned to Earth with captured Karathak vessels, stolen technology, and detailed intelligence about a dozen other galactic civilizations. Dr. Grant was already designing hybrid weapon systems that combined human ruthlessness with alien technology. Admiral Kethvar concluded his report with a personal observation that will be quoted in galactic military academies for centuries. "We came to observe what we believe would be a demonstration of Karathak military superiority over a primitive species. Instead, we witnessed the emergence of something unprecedented in galactic history." He paused, staring at the final tactical display, showing human ships disappearing into hyperspace with their captured prizes. Humanity does not wage war as we understand it. They do not seek conquest, resources, or territory. They seek to prove that there is no limit to the price they will pay, no escalation they will not match, no sacrifice they will not make. His final words became the standard warning attached to all human contact protocols throughout the galaxy. They do not fear death. They do not seek peace. They do not understand surrender. They treat warfare as education and enemies as teaching materials. Recommendation for all civilized species: avoid at all costs. Within a year, human territory was surrounded by a buffer zone that no alien ship would cross. Trade routes were redirected around human space. Expansion plans were modified to avoid any possibility of contact. The galaxy had learned what the Karathak discovered too late. Some species were too dangerous to fight, too unpredictable to negotiate with, and too alien to understand. Humanity was left alone in their corner of space, free to develop their hybrid technologies and train their young warriors for battles that, thankfully, would never come. The alien observers had achieved their goal. They had witnessed a demonstration of military capability. They simply hadn't expected to discover that some demonstrations were also warnings.